All right, Speech 1315, and welcome to the overview of Chapter 13 for our Speech 1315 course. In today's lecture video, we will be discussing the wording of the speech and why it is so important. So let's jump in. The power of words is known across advertising agencies. So, for example, if I said new look or improved taste, we see this all over the supermarket when we have a new brand or a rebranding. It grabs our attention and it makes us want to try out a product, listen, or engage with whatever product or person we are interacting with. So words are powerful. For example, a psychologist study took this picture and they gave one group of participants just a general sentence and said, how fast do you think this car was when they smashed into the other car? Whereas the other group of participants were told, how fast do you think this car was going when they hit the other car? Just the difference in changing the words smashed and hit impacted people's perceptions of speed. So people in the smashed, or people who heard the sentence that said smash, thought that the tan car was going faster than on average than people in the hit condition. Individuals in the condition that received the word hit thought that the car was going. So words can impact our perceptions of events. It's important to use appropriate words when creating the outline of your speech and when presenting. So what do I mean by this? First and foremost, avoid gender bias stereotypes. You don't want to say, or for example, nurse versus male nurse, right? Soldier versus female soldier. You also want to avoid gender bias pronouns, such as you want to use plural pronouns, use the pronoun you. I always like to go with they or we. It's actually more inclusive, and typically, and this has been something that even Simon Sinek has spoke on when it comes to how he presents, he tries to use more general terms so that everyone feels like they are included in what he's talking about. And when you're able to think about that and do that for your audience members, they tend to listen more and feel like they're included in what you're discussing. Also, obviously, be mindful of religious affiliations, titles, culture, ethnicity, you name it, when you are creating your speech, when discussing appropriate words. If you feel like at any point a word could potentially offend someone, it's a very clear decision that it's just better to take it out. Like, better be safe than sorry. When using appropriate words, for example, the first bullet point says every driver should buckle his seatbelt before he starts the engine. This is very much directed towards men, and it's basically saying that men can only be truck drivers or drivers in general, not necessarily. The second one said all drivers should buckle their seatbelts before they start the engine. And then the third one says you should buckle your seatbelt before you start your engine. The third one is a lot more direct, as you can see from the middle one, which is more all about, it's very general in how they direct the message. Using words accurately. So use precise denotations. When does middle age begin? If you ask 30-year-olds, 30-year-olds will say that middle age starts at the age of 40. If you ask 40-year-olds, middle age starts at the age of 50. So be precise when you are discussing denotations. Also make sure to control connotations. So if we say rally, gathering, and mob, these all can mean very different things. So a rally can be seen as a very positive word, whereas a gathering can also be seen as positive. When I think of a gathering, I think of a group of people getting together. I don't think of a rally versus a mob. You'll see that in the media, depending, like, we see this very clearly with our news outlets. One outlet may say that it was a rally and the other one may say that it was a mob. And what they are essentially doing is they are using those words powerfully, and they know that those words will elicit emotions in individuals that will get a reaction, and that's all they're looking for. You also want to use correct grammar. For example, it is wrong to say I did good. It's actually grammatically correct to say I did well. Similarly, it's grammatically incorrect to say you're going to be sorry, whereas it's grammatically correct to say you're going to be sorry. You also should strive to achieve clarity when writing. So the way you can do this is striving for simplicity. The example they give is the first sentence says, it's important to advise all parties concerned to take immediate and expeditious action to vacate the premises. That's very wordy and verbose. It's better to say, tell everyone to get out of the house as quickly as possible. We are saying the same thing between these two bullet points, but one is a lot more easily digested and comprehended. If you think that something cannot get more simpler, believe me, I have, before the years of ChatGPT, I had to do exercises in grad school where I would take 2 pages and I would have to get it down to a paragraph, and then that paragraph down to a sentence. And that's very difficult. But it's a great exercise to strive for simplicity. And that's what you should also do with your speeches. Someone gave me a really great tip is, does your speech pass the 5th grade test? And why do we say the 5th grade test? We say the 5th grade because in 5th grade, the comprehension levels, you want to speak like you're speaking to a 5th grader, so that if a 5th grader can understand what you're saying, the majority of the population can understand what you're saying. That was a tip I got a long, long time ago, but it's may not be relevant now. Obviously, if you're speaking to a room full of NASA scientists, you wouldn't want to make things so simple for a 5th grader that they would understand it. But depending on what your topic is. However, I always think it's very interesting is if you can take a complex topic and make it simple, you're going to have this really cool skill and tool that employers are going to look for in the workforce. You want to use concrete words. So my first statement is be specific. So you don't want to be very abstract and say, oh, it was a hot day. You want to be specific and say, with temperatures above 100 degrees and no clouds to shield the sun, it was a sweltering outside. This really, how do I put this? If you just say it was a hot day, people in the Midwest would think that a hot day is 85 degrees. In Texas, 85 is a nice, cool fall evening, right? Or fall day. So you need to be specific. You also need to use precise words. So beware of double speaking. So you don't want to use euphemisms, which is you don't want to say raising taxes becomes revenue enhancement, because that's double speaking. Sometimes this is also called as a double bind, but the textbook refers to it as double speaking. You also want to beware of inflated language. So garbage collectors become sanitation engineers. I always think of if you go on a date and someone says, oh, I'm in education. And what comes to my mind is someone who's a K through 12 teacher, someone who's in administration, someone who's in education. It would probably violate your expectation if they said, oh, I'm the janitor at a children's daycare. It's not really education, right? So they inflated their title or their status. So similarly, you don't want to inflate your language. Don't misuse jargon. So the jargon example they gave was the teenager's maladaptive mania episode. This translates to the teenager's wild and crazy outburst. You don't know if someone's going to understand your jargon. The jargon of my time is, it was a vibe. What does that mean? I can tell you right now, my mother does not know what a vibe is. Similarly, if someone came up to me in a speech and was like, that's on -1,000 aura, I potentially know what that is, maybe. But I can tell you that the majority of people in a room, maybe not, depending on who your audience members are. So just be aware of the jargon that you're using. Using vivid language. So vivid language is done through imagery. So you paint a picture for someone with your words. That's essentially imagery. You can use metaphors and similes. Metaphors are, as an example here, enemy submarines were sharks that prowled the sea for prey. So you're making a comparison, whereas a simile is where you're comparing something through like or as. So enemy submarines were like sharks that prowled the sea for prey. These are also great ways to give vivid language in your speech. Using rhetorical devices. So you can have alliterations. This is where the first letter of each word is the same. So baby boomers, so soft and silky, Coca-Cola. Antithesis always gets me. He has cold hands, but a warm heart. These are like counteracting viewpoints. That's another way to use rhetorical devices in your speech. You can also have parallel structure and repetition. So parallel, we want a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So there's a parallel within each of those statements, like of the people, by the people, for the people. Whereas repetition is we must work hard to blank. We must work hard to blank. We must work hard to blank. And so parallel structure and repetition are also another great tool to use when you're writing your speeches. And there's also a clear difference between oral versus written language. So when you write something, you might say, don't be impetus. If you say that in a speech, it's going to go really, really quick. Whereas if you are presenting, you might take that statement and say, don't rush into a project with a full burst of energy and emotion. Slow down. Think about what you're doing before you act. So just because you write something doesn't mean it's going to come out the same way when you speak it. I always give that as a tip when I'm working with presenters is you may write something, but when it comes time to reading it off the paper, it may not sound good. Or well, it may not sound well. So you may need to change it. And don't be afraid to change it. It's okay to change it because the written word is very different than how you present orally. Some tips for your career. Explore rhetorical devices in more depth. These will be very beneficial for you when you're in a boardroom. So these are polysyndeton's. So it's almost like this rhythmic way of speaking. So we shall defend ourselves with soldiers and arms and planes and tanks. If I was writing a sentence, having that many ands in a sentence wouldn't make sense, right? But it's rhythmically catchy and draws your audience members in. Let me reread it. We shall defend ourselves with soldiers and arms and planes and tanks. That grabs people's attention, and because of the rhythm behind it. Again, you wouldn't write it, but it sounds really good when you are speaking. And then you can search for additional rhetorical devices online to help you in writing your speeches. Audio, radio is a really good place to go for rhetorical devices. But with that being said, I hope that this video helped you understand just the importance of writing and the words that you choose and how much of an impact it can have emotionally on people's attention to your speech. And I hope you implement some of the tactics that I discussed here today. As usual, if you have any questions, please email me or contact me if you have any questions or would like to discuss this chapter in more depth. Have a great day. Bye.